Hello and welcome to episode number 232. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Nice to have you with us. More and more people are preparing for their PMI Agile Certified Practitioner. That's the PMI-ACP exam. And you may have noticed that in the last 2 years, the topics here on the Project Management Podcast have seen more and more Agile influences. This is partly because of my personal interest in Agile and having worked on Agile teams, and partly because, as a company, we decided to develop and launch the Agile Prepcast at agileprepcast.com that helps you prepare for this exam. So in today's episode, we interview Alan Matheson, who recently passed his PMI-ACP exam. What I like about his experience with the exam in particular is the fact that his exam application got audited, which is something that many people dread. But you will hear from Alan himself that if you are truthful in your application and approach it right, then being audited is a simple and straightforward process. As you know, the rules of all PMI exams are such that we are not allowed to discuss specific questions from the exam, but we can discuss Alan's overall experience, general thought on the process, and his recommendations to you. So you can look forward to an experience and tip-filled interview on how to prepare for and pass your PMI-ACP exam. And now let's get together for our daily stand-up meeting. Enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcast's feature interview.
Today with Alan Matheson, Project Manager and Agile Consultant.
Hello, Alan, and welcome to the program.
Hello, Cornelius. Thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, congratulations on passing the PMI-ACP exam. What a great milestone.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It was an exciting challenge for me.
All right. When exactly did you pass?
It was January 19th, so about 3 months ago.
Okay, right. Excellent. So, first things first, because this is something happened to you that everyone is kind of quote-unquote afraid of. You got audited.
Yes.
Tell us all about it.
Yes.
How was it? Was it a miserable experience? Was it a good experience? How did it go?
Well, for me, it wasn't so bad because I was prepared for it. I had approached the application process with complete confidence in the information I was providing. There were no real concerns on my part. So I submitted the application online to PMI on a Monday and received an email stating that they were reviewing my application and that I'd be notified to make payment once it had been reviewed and approved. That's their standard process. Mm-hmm. So 2 days later, on Wednesday, I received an email from the PMI informing me that the application had been approved and asking me to make payment. So after I logged on to the PMI website, made payment for the exam, I immediately received a message that I was randomly selected for an audit. And
right. Now, when you say immediately, was that on screen? Did you get an email? Both?
Both, yes. I got a pop-up on the screen that told me I was randomly selected. And they asked that I give them more detailed evidence of two things within the next 90 days. Mm-hmm. So they wanted proof of my attendance from the Agile training I had taken and proof of my 1,500 hours experience working on an Agile project.
Yep.
And I am a project management professional. So if I had not been a PMP, the project management professionals are waived from providing evidence.
The 2,000 extra hours.
That's exactly right. Yes, that 2,000 hours. So that was waived, but I can only assume they would have asked me for that as well if I had not been a PMP. So the data was pretty easy to gather. I had copies of my certified Scrum Master certificate and signed letters of attendance for other Agile training. I was fully prepared for the audit.
Okay. The fourth criteria that you need to fulfill for the PMI-ACP is, I believe the minimum is a high school diploma, isn't it? They didn't want to see that.
They didn't ask for that from me. That's right.
Of course, you've already been a PMP, so since you've passed the PMP exam,
that's probably why.
They already had that.
Yeah, that's probably why.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the next thing they did, they gave me access to an Agile Experience report at their website. And it was pre-filled with all the Agile Experience data I had previously entered on the application.
Mm-hmm.
And this had to be signed by someone from that project who could verify my experience.
Yes.
So in my case, this happened to be the project I was working on at the time. So it was pretty easy to track down that person. And you just need to keep that in mind. When you fill out the experience and contact person on your application, if you're selected for an audit, you're going to need to track down that person and have them vouch for you. So PMI requested that I put this signed form in an envelope, seal the envelope, and have the contact person from that project sign the back of the envelope over the seal. So I followed their instructions exactly as requested.
Yeah, it sounds kind of weird, but I do understand what they want to make sure. They want to make sure that the person who is actually your contact person signs the envelope on the outside, making sure that nobody tampered with it.
That's exactly right. So I did exactly what they had asked me to do. Mailed the audit materials to the PMI, and they sent me an email a couple of days later letting me know they...
And by mail, we're talking physical mail.
That's right.
We're not talking photocopy and email.
That's exactly right.
Put it in an envelope, take it to the post office.
Right, that's what I did. And so they sent me an email a couple of days later letting me know they had received that. And then I got an email a day after that letting me know that it had been approved. So it was a pretty fast process. And at that point, I was permitted to schedule the exam.
Excellent. What I always recommend to my students is, as you are preparing your application, go ahead and actually contact your contact person. Get in touch with them, tell them, hey, I'm taking this exam. This is what I'm going to put into my application. Are you already okay with this? Did you go to that length and actually tell them ahead of time?
Not ahead of time. No, I didn't. I was working with the person, and I worked side by side with the person, so I didn't see it as a problem. But I do think that's a great idea. You do need to be completely ready for an audit. You don't want to fail a PMI audit.
Yeah, exactly.
And have everything ready.
Thing.
So,
yeah. Okay, perfect. So it was actually almost a good experience for you. There was nothing that really turned into a roadblock.
No, not at all. It was fine, but primarily because I approached the application process as if I were going to be audited. I just assumed I would be audited, and you just need to be honest and provide all the information they ask for.
Exactly. Be truthful, be ready, and you're good to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on, and let's begin at the end, actually, because I like to start with this question here. You are now PMI-ACP certified. You studied hard, you prepared, you got through the exam. If you had to do all of this again, what would you do differently?
Good question. I personally wouldn't do too much differently. I was overall happy with my study program and schedule and wouldn't have changed much. I've recently been through some other certifications and have learned lessons from them, which I applied to the PMI-ACP process. So that the most important lesson there, I felt, is that the best path for successfully passing an exam is follow a structured exam program in one form or another, including a study and exam schedule. And I used a PMI-ACP exam preparation book as my primary study source and supplemented that by reading other Agile books and reading various Agile blogs, listening to podcasts, watching Agile videos. But it was important for me to set my own schedule, follow it as closely as possible in order to meet my goal.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll get into the details in just a bit.
Okay.
But you did mention that you had taken some other exams as well.
Yes.
What were those exams?
Well, I recently took the Certified Scrum Professional exam from the Scrum Alliance.
The CSP.
That's right.
Yes.
And also a OCSMP. It's a Systems Modeling Language certification. This is an extension of UML for the Systems Engineering domain. So these are some certifications I took in the past year.
Okay. And then why did you decide to put the PMI-ACP sort of on top of the CSP, if you wish, or aside next to the CSP?
Yes, I did the two in parallel, actually. And it was really because, I had managed projects with traditional waterfall for years under CMMI and ISO, very heavy on the process end. And I had overall good results, but recognized that there were some projects where I needed to be more responsive to, satisfying the customer, frequently making sure their needs are met, being more adaptable to their changes. And Agile appeared to be that piece that was missing. And I started studying Agile methodologies. The industry case studies certainly looked promising. The Agile Manifesto was a good summary of the kinds of improvement I was looking for. That was something where, I needed to find a good program that would get me to the point I needed to be at. I don't believe there is a silver bullet process methodology or framework that's going to solve all our problems. I've been around long enough to have learned that, but I could see the potential benefit of Agile, and I could see that much of the industry was heading there for good reasons. So after I got some Agile training and experience, I eventually decided to follow a structured program to help me improve my knowledge and versatility in Agile methods and techniques. And I had already been through the Project Management Professional certification process several years ago. I was already familiar with the Project Management Institute and their certification process. And I just reasoned that if I followed a structured program and passed that exam, I'd have a pretty reasonable self-assessment of a broad degree of Agile knowledge that I wanted to achieve. And I also wanted to get the PMI-ACP to improve my own marketability. The PMI is already recognized. They're a highly credible organization throughout the industry. They've always had a very rigorous certification process, and I knew that my potential clients and hiring managers in the future could put a certain amount of trust in the credibility of the PMI-ACP certification, largely because it's administered by the PMI. But as far as the CSP, the Certified Scrum Professional, my goal was to study for both in parallel. The PMI-ACP covers all of the common Agile methods and practices, including Scrum and XP and others. And the CSP primarily focuses on Scrum. But since Scrum is the most commonly used Agile framework in the industry, I really wanted to understand it at a deeper level and attain that certification as well. This is also a very rigorous test with prerequisite qualifications similar to the PMI-ACP.
And which one of the two tests was easier for you?
Wow. Neither.
Or are they about equal?
Neither. They were really about equal. And surprisingly, the CSP, it really was a fairly broad test. It didn't focus on Scrum as much as I thought it would. It was very broad. It pulled in a lot of the engineering practices of XP and some other common Agile topics.
Okay. Let's move on to your PMI-ACP application. How difficult was it for you to fill in all the information that was required?
It wasn't all that difficult for me. I'm a fairly organized person, so I had all of the data nearby. The main thing that they asked for was evidence of my eligibility. And
Right.
so they were asking for, as you mentioned before, evidence of a diploma or a degree or the equivalent. And as we talked about, if you're not an active project management professional or PGMP, you need to document the 2,000 hours of general project experience. Be sure to gather all your details before filling this out because they ask for your project title, dates, your job title, all kinds of information. It's good to have it on hand when you fill this out. And again, you're going to need to give them the name and a way to contact a person who can verify your professional experience, as we talked about before. And this could be a project sponsor, manager, one of your clients, but you need to have all this information. So also in a similar fashion, you need to document the 1,500 hours of Agile project experience. And this requires the same type of information as the general project experience. And last, you need to document the 21 hours of Agile experience.
The last one should probably be the easiest because it's usually, you take a PMI-ACP preparation course and you're done, right?
That's exactly right. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's move on to your actual preparation for the exam. How much time did it take you to prepare and study for the exam? And yes, we do understand you studied for the CSP and the PMI-ACP in parallel, right? So
yes.
Did that add time to your studies? Did that actually help you in your studies?
Well, it did both. Yes, I which was expected. But since I was working on some other certifications that were not related to these, I actually started the process way back in January of 2012. And,
so it took you a whole year to get ready.
Well, in a sense, back in January is when I decided, hey, this is what I want to do, but I'm not ready to dive in deep yet and do deep studies because I had other certification programs that I had to get through first. So I really didn't dive in deep until November of 2012. So,
Okay.
but I did do some background studying, between January and November. I read some books and tried to just get as much as I could in the background. I was spread fairly thin, though. So I didn't really dive in deep until November, and then it took me about 8 weeks. But
Okay.
but I researched the study resources that were available and suggested by others online. I bought 2 PMI-ACP exam preparation books.
Okay.
And I had decided that I wanted to get the knowledge from 2 different authors to kind of help.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I wanted
yes.
to reduce the risk of receiving the wrong information, just kind
Yeah.
of
Tell us which
validate.
ones they were.
Sure. One was by Mike Griffiths, and it's called PMI-ACP Exam Prep. And the other one is called the ACP Exam Prep Plus Desk Reference. It's by a company called
Right. That's the one from Grade
Great
PM.
PM,
the second
exactly.
one.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Okay. Yep.
So those are my 2 primary sources. They were both excellent guides, but I kept finding myself gravitating to the guide by Mike Griffiths more than the other.
Okay.
So I ended up using his book as my primary study source, and the one by Great PM as a secondary guide for reference. I read Mike's book cover to cover in detail once, and then I skimmed over it quickly a second time. So
Did you use any simulators?
I did, yes. First there were tests that are scattered in both of those books that I mentioned. Very good test questions. And I found a few sources online with some practice questions. One was a website called VelociTeach, and they sell a 1-week access to a set of 120 sample questions. So I purchased that. That was well worth it. I thought they had an excellent set that it very closely matched the types of questions you can expect on the exam. There were several other sources of sample questions I found, but I kind of had mixed results. Some of the questions were great. Some of them appear to be either far too easy or far too difficult. This was just at various sites online. It was a challenge to find a really large set of questions that I felt were an accurate reflection of the difficulty of the actual test. And so you really need to be aware. Don't let the practice exams affect your confidence level in the wrong way. If a practice exam has too many easy questions, you can really become overconfident, and that'll increase your risk of entering the exam room unprepared. And then just the opposite, if you practice with too many difficult questions on sample exams, your confidence level can really be unfairly affected. But then, on the other hand, you might be prompted to overstudy for the exam, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Pass with flying colors.
That's exactly right.
Well, you're also a certified PMP. Let's compare the question difficulty to the PMP, if you can at all. Would you say they are on par with the PMP? Are they easier than the PMP? Are they more difficult than the PMP? Where would you place them?
A little easier.
A little easier.
Yeah, this was a difficult exam, but you can pass it. You study hard, you follow a good program, and you can pass it. The PMP was more difficult, though, I'd say.
Okay. You mentioned that you read some other books as well. Were they some of those books that PMI has on their recommended reading list?
Yes. Well, the PMI recommended reading list, they have 11 books in their list. And at a detailed level, I read Mike Cohn's books, Agile Estimating and Planning and User Stories Applied. Both great books. I highly recommend them. At a higher level, I quickly looked through all the others except one. So the way I was able to do that, instead of purchasing all 11 books, online, there is a Safari Books website, and they currently carry 10 of the 11 books that the PMI recommends. So you can purchase a subscription there currently for $20 a month, I believe, to gain access to 10 books. And actually, if you're okay to read from a screen instead of paper, you should certainly consider getting a subscription from them. It really helped me.
Right.
So the only one they didn't have was the Agile Retrospectives book by Esther Derby, I believe.
Let me also give people an alternative to Safari Books, because PMI also offers a very similar service. It's called PMI e-Reads, and it is on the PMI.org website. If you are a PMI member, you have access to PMI e-Reads, and there are hundreds of project management related books that you can read online without having to pay a penny for it.
Oh, wonderful.
And however, I do not know how many of the 11 books from the list are actually available through e-reads. This is something I probably should make myself a note and check it out so I could tell people in the future. Right. So you said you sort of studied on a high level between January and November, and then from November on, you really dug deep. If you had to make a guess, how many hours of self-study did you put in?
Oh, wow. I didn't keep a detailed record, but during those 8 weeks of really heavy studying, I put in around 100 to 110 hours probably. It was a couple hours a day.
Okay.
Before
the usual
that,
1 to 2 hours a day
right.
over the course of 8 to 10 weeks.
That's exactly right.
That's about the norm that I see that people put in there.
Yeah. And that was sufficient for me.
Okay. Now, we are not allowed to talk about exam questions specifically at all, but we are allowed to sort of get around it just slightly by asking you this. What topics would you recommend that people are really familiar with before they take the PMI-ACP exam?
Well, first and foremost, the Agile Manifesto. You need to know that backwards and forwards. And let's see, you need to know they're going to all the other Agile frameworks and methods are closely aligned with the manifesto, so you really need to understand it in extreme detail. You also need to be able to list the important attributes of Scrum and XP. Those are the two most commonly followed Agile frameworks. They're Scrum events, roles, and artifacts. XP has several core values and engineering practices. You need to know how, when, and why to apply these. And it was helpful for me to memorize them and be able to quickly list them out. So the exam certainly isn't limited to Scrum and XP, but since those are the two most commonly used methods, you really need to understand them very well.
Excellent. I think that's good enough for now. Let's move on to the actual exam.
Sure.
Where was the location where you took your exam?
It was at a Prometric testing center about 30 miles from where I live. And I had recently taken those other certification exams at the same location, so I was already familiar with it.
Okay. So since you already knew where it was, you didn't bother going there a week before to check it out because you had seen it several times.
No, but the first time I went for my first exam, I did get into a street view online just to find out where is it, how long will it take to get there. Didn't want to be late, so I left very early, to make sure I got there on time. So.
Okay. And what was the test center like? How stringent is security and the check-in? And were you allowed to take any breaks?
Yes, it was nice. I was scheduled for the first time slot of the day. It was 10 a.m.
That's easy.
Yeah, it was 10 a.m. on a Saturday. I got there early. They signed me in right away, 30 minutes early, actually, and they went ahead and signed me in. They don't permit you to bring anything in the exam room. No phone, no paper or pencil, but they have lockers for personal items. So.
Wristwatch? Did you have to take that off?
I didn't carry one, but I'm sure I'd have to take it off.
Okay.
Yeah. So anything you bring with you, it needs to stay in your car or in a locker if they have lockers there. If ambient noise in the room bothers you, you're not allowed to bring in your own earplugs or headphones. They do have some earplugs on hand usually that they'll give you if you ask. So so the room seated about 20, 25 people or so. And each space was set up with a Windows XP desktop computer. They had tables in the room arranged classroom style, 2 computers per table facing the front of the room. There were no partitions between the computers, so at least at my particular location. So I had someone else sitting next to me taking an exam and another person in front of me, another one behind me, and they administer several different types of exams. So the person sitting next to you might be taking an exam for TSA certification or PMP certification or any other number of exams because they are a Prometric testing center.
Right. And there's probably also movement, people coming and going constantly, right?
That's absolutely right. And in fact, in my exam, one poor girl got a terrible cough and it went on for 5 minutes and wouldn't stop. So those kind of things do happen. There are distractions and you need to be able just to stay focused and be concerned with your exam.
Okay. Was there anything in the testing center that you found surprising? For example, one of my students, he told me that he was surprised that there was a camera on top of his computer screen actually filming him as he was taking the exam.
No, good question. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. I don't recall seeing a camera, but I wouldn't be surprised if they had them in there for good reason. But there was nothing that really surprised me.
All right. How much of the 3 hours did you use?
I used about 2 hours to get through the exam, and then I went back and checked over some of my answers for the next 20 minutes or so.
All right, so you were done after about 2.5 hours then.
That's right.
Excellent, excellent. So how nervous were you when you went and you clicked that end exam button and then the "Are you sure?"
Oh, I wasn't that nervous. I felt pretty confident about the exam, and when I pressed the final button, the message that I had passed was displayed right away.
Right away. So they did not require you to take a survey before they would display whether you passed.
No, there's an optional survey at the end.
Oh, look at that. So they changed it recently then from optional to mandatory, because according to the PMI handbook, they say it's a mandatory survey.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. No, in my case,
Interesting.
it was optional.
Okay. So again, we whenever we do these lesson learned interviews, we learn something new, because most people told us in the past, hey, the survey is mandatory. When you click end exam, there's nothing you can do. You have to take the survey, and only after you're done with the survey, takes about 5 minutes, and you say end survey, then they will show you your result on the screen. And in your case, it was optional, and you immediately saw the result.
I did, in fact, yes.
Fascinating.
It's definitely optional.
Fascinating. So you saw it, you got up, you went outside, and you received a printed score report, right?
That's correct, yes. And it has your levels of proficiency in the two content areas, the tools and techniques area and the knowledge and skills area. So there are 3 proficiency levels they rate you on: proficient, moderately proficient, and below proficient. And they rate that for each of those 2 areas. I was proficient in both areas, but the report didn't show exact numbers, such as how many questions I missed or got correct.
Right. Yeah. PMI stopped doing that several years back.
Yes.
The score report is, of course, not your official credential, although the moment that you see you have passed on the screen, you can call yourself PMI-ACP.
Right.
You don't have to wait for anything official to arrive. But PMI does mail out a package to you. How long did it take you for you to receive that package?
I believe it was about 2 weeks after I passed.
Okay, that's very good. All right, so that's about it for right now. Is there anything that you feel that we haven't discussed in enough detail where you'd like to focus on before we close?
No, just stick with it, and you can do it. Believe in yourself. I know that sounds cliche-ish, but you can push through and pass the exam.
Lovely. So you've mentioned that you had taken several exams before and during the PMI-ACP. Are there any other exams in your future?
No, not anytime soon.
Are you done with it?
No, well, I don't plan to stop learning, that's for sure. But as far as certifications go, not in the near future.
Well, Alan, thank you very much for having come on the program today. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me, Cornelius. I appreciate it.
And that was our interview with Alan Matheson on how to prepare for and pass your PMI-ACP exam. And just as a reminder, if you are a project manager and you want to become PMI-ACP certified, then the easiest way to do so is with our sister podcast, the Agile Prepcast, and study for the exam by watching the in-depth exam prep video training from agileprepcast.com. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, do tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have another general saying for you that we twisted for project management use. The saying is, if a job is worth doing, it is worth doing well. And for us project managers, this translates to, if a project is worth doing, then management will cancel it. Until next time.